All right, why don't we get started with our art talk with Sarah Kane. We have a very interesting artist, kind of in the same theme as we did last week with the Southwest. Georgia O'Keeffe, oh my goodness, she's done so much work, all very interesting. Part of the kind of the modernist period, but she really used a lot of the American Southwest as her inspiration. And so let's go ahead over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. So Georgia O'Keeffe was born in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, to a family of dairy farmers. And a fun fact that is that her maternal grandfather, George Toto, who she was actually named after, was a Hungarian count. I did not know that until recently. So Georgia decided by a young age, I think it was like 10 or something, that she wanted to be an artist. So her mother sent her to watercolor classes along with her sisters. She then went on to study at the Art Institute of Chicago and the Art Students League in New York. And while living in New York, she frequented visits to Gallery 291, which was owned by Alfred Stieglitz. And the gallery was one of the only places in the US at the time where European avant-garde art was exhibited. And that's where O'Keeffe was influenced by painters like Matisse and Rodin. So let's look at some of her paintings. So she took a job teaching at Columbia College in South Carolina. She taught in Virginia and a couple other states as well at this time. And in 1915, she began drawing and painting with a new technique, one that took everyday objects like plants, clouds, or waves and simplified them to non-representational lines and shapes. So this is part of her blue series in 1916. And this is blue number 1. And this is blue number 2. So there are actually 4 pieces total in this series, and they each get subsequently more simplistic, with blue number 4 being the most simple. Some say it's related to her relationship with music, especially this one, blue number 2, because it looks like the neck of a violin. And she actually took up playing violin at this time in her life. So Alfred Stieglitz noticed her potential and exhibited 10 of her drawings. She did a series of charcoal drawings, exhibited 10 of her charcoal drawings at his gallery, Gallery 291, without her knowing, because he just believed in her talent. He saw potential in her. And this actually began their professional and eventual romantic relationship. So Stieglitz introduced her to his circle of artist friends, and her art began to gain popularity. By the mid-1920s, she was considered one of the best American artists, and her work began to garner high prices. And this was the beginning of a theme that would define her career. This is called Red Canna, was done in 1915. And this is called Petunia number 2, done in 1924. And I wanted to show a couple different images of her flower paintings because she was actually one of the only artists to use flowers as a motif in a modern way consistently throughout her career. She emphasizes the shape and the color by magnifying the flower. And I love this quote. She said, "Nobody really sees a flower. Really, it is so small. We haven't time. And to see takes time. So I said to myself, I'll paint what I see. What the flower is to me, but I'll paint it big, and they will be surprised into taking time to look at it." I love that because I think often, flowers are used maybe in a bouquet to bring color to a room or a nice smell. But when you take the time really to look at a singular flower, the structure of a flower, it's incredibly detailed. And, she was one of the only artists really focusing on that specific detail of flowers. I think that's beautiful. So another defining theme and period of O'Keeffe's career was the inspiration she took from New Mexico. The O'Keeffe Museum is actually located in Santa Fe. If you're ever there, you should visit. It's great. So in 1929, O'Keeffe was first invited to New Mexico to a friend's ranch in Taos to paint. And she was enamored by the barren landscapes, the distinct architecture, and ended up returning every year to paint and eventually buying 2 properties in New Mexico. So this painting is called Cow's Skull, Red, White, and Blue. It was done in 1931. And O'Keeffe was fascinated with animal skulls. It was, again, another consistent motif that she used throughout her work. She loved the sharp, jagged edges, as well as the kind of symbolism of transient life. And what's interesting about this painting is that the skull is completely divorced from its landscape. So she puts it on a red, white, and blue background, which scholars say marries naturalism and nationalism. It could also be, this was in 1931, so it could also be a reference to the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, thus making this painting kind of an economic and environmental statement. But she elevates this symbol of the New Mexican desert in a very modern way. So O'Keeffe is widely revered as an early figure in the feminist art movement, but what I find actually quite funny is that she really pushed back against wanting to be associated with that, and she refused to partake in these kind of all-women artist events or movements because she wanted to be seen as an artist, not as a woman artist, which is in fact the most feminist idea of them all. And I'm sure she didn't even realize how modernly feminist that statement in itself was. She received many awards and accolades throughout her life, and posthumously, some of which were, she was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Letters. She received an honorary degree from Harvard, and in 1985, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Ronald Reagan. Overall, Georgia O'Keeffe is widely referred to as the mother of American modernism. So I hope this was a broad introduction to some of her work. Thank you.
Very, very cool, Sarah. Thank you so much. I think also the U.S. Postal Service honored her as well, right? With some of their stamps, commemorative stamp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dick, do you have any of those stamps?
Yeah,
I do not, but I did actually find a picture of one. It was released in 1996. So stand by. I think I have it somewhere. I put it somewhere. Where is it?
As you look for that, do you have any questions about Georgia O'Keeffe's work?
Here we go. I'm pulling up the stamp right now.
Sarah, hi, this is Dave.
Hi. Here's her stamp.
Yeah. Do you know if she mainly concentrated on watercolors? Most of the paintings I see seem to be watercolors.
She worked in a variety of mediums. I think watercolor was kind of her first introduction to art, so that could be something, you know, she was really comfortable with. She also did charcoal drawings. She did oil on canvas. And then later in her career, she experimented with pottery
Okay.
as well. She lost her sight in her old age to macular degeneration. And so she only had her peripheral vision. So she started working with sculpture and pottery to kind of feel it instead of being able to actually see and paint.
I wonder if she was influenced by the pottery of New Mexico then.
Probably, I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay. I've never seen that. I've never seen her pottery work.
See if I can pull up a picture.
He lived to like 98, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. She lived very long. Let's see. Georgia O'Keeffe pottery. So yeah, the later in her life, she spent most of her time in New Mexico. So yeah, that definitely could be an influence with the pottery.
Great. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I do want to mention before we go to our next segment that I had just recently read, I don't know if any of you caught our Mark Rothko segment on Art Talk. I think we have if you didn't catch it, I think it's on SharePoint.
It is.
So I just, something very unusual just is recently happening. A museum that actually has a very early Rothko red in New York State. It's a small museum, but I guess they're trying to do some fundraising. They're actually selling their Rothko into using an auction house. So it's actually very rare for a painting to go from, you know, basically in the public hands of a museum to a private collector. It's unfortunate, actually.
Yeah.